Years ago, my brother disappeared. He was 34 at the time. Adults can get up and leave whenever they like, for whatever reason. He left a simple note behind, saying he was looking for something, and that he still loved his family, even though he needed to leave for a while. I've gotten letters in the past 12 years from him saying he was still alive, although deep in the back of my mind, I assumed those letters might not be from him. A knock came at the door in the middle of the night. My son slept like the dead, so it didn't wake him up. I had no idea who it might be. The idea of a certain familiar face being on the other side never ever crossed my mind. Maybe my neighbor needed something. When I opened the door, I saw a man whom I almost mistook for my late father. He had the same high cheekbones and sandy brown hair. My mouth fell open, unable to form words. "Sorry it's been so long," he spoke and showed a strained smile. My hands flew to his face to see if he was really there. The brother I thought was dead had changed so much in those years he'd been gone. Before, he was a bit on the chubbier side with the messy, unkempt hair. Back then, you would never assume he worked as a cop, and then later as a detective. Now, he had the look of one, or at least one you would see on a classic detective show. He had lost the weight, professionally styled his hair, and wore a blue button-down shirt that matched his eyes. "What the hell?" I hissed. I kept my voice low and took hold of the front of his shirt, giving it a little shake. He had always been on the shorter side, so it had been easy to manhandle him. My brother raised a hand, giving my chest a playful push, trying to get the shaking to stop. I took his wrist and pushed up his shirt sleeve. He was bruised all over, with new scars up and down his arm, as if he had lost a few fights with a rabid animal. "What happened? These are recent," I said. My mind was racing a million miles per second. Was he kidnapped? Trafficked? Who hurt him? What had he been doing while he was gone? What the hell happened to my brother? "I'm fine," he lied. He took a step, and his legs faltered. I needed to support his weight, and started to get him up to the empty bedroom upstairs to rest. The questions could wait until he sat down. I helped him on the side of the bed, looking him over more. The first few buttons of his shirt were undone, showing he wore a few necklaces, which I thought was odd. He never would have worn jewelry before. He also had pierced his ears. 2 black, simple studs were on each side. I shook my head, even more confused by all of this. How did he change so much? It wasn't just his appearance. He was far calmer than before. I loved my brother, but he got annoyed really easily. "I'm sorry," he said again, with his hands held tightly in front of him, clearly guilty over leaving for so many years. "Carson was worried about you, Charlie," I replied with crossed arms. I wanted to be angry, but it felt right to be able to call him by his nickname again. No matter what, I still loved him. He showed a tired smile that hurt my heart. He really did look like our father, and I was a bit jealous of how gracefully he aged. When did my short, chubby brother turn into a model? I feared his new looks were the reason why he may have been forcefully away for so many years. "I wish I had a good reason. How many years was it here? I think I lost track of time." He trailed off, looking away as if trying to do a hard math problem. "What do you mean by here? Time works the same everywhere. It's been 12 years. And honestly, I'm just glad you're back. I don't need a reason." "You're a bad liar." I smacked him upside the head. "I'm being a good brother. Of course I want to know why you left, but I know you need time to recover." I threatened to hit him again, but he just softly laughed while holding up his hands. Normally, this sort of thing would get us into a fight. I couldn't get over how much he mellowed out. "Let me show you what I learned while I was gone." He stood up, and I didn't really care about any neat tricks he had up his sleeve. I wanted him to rest, and then tell us what he was doing all these years. In that order. He pulled out a slip of paper from his pocket, and asked me to rip it into tiny pieces. I humored him and dumped the pile on the dresser. I watched as he then took a piece of chalk and drew a perfect circle on the top of the dresser. I was impressed. He was never the artistic kind of person. A circle that perfect would be hard for most people to do. He placed the pieces of paper in the middle of the circle and then started to write odd symbols around it, causing me to frown. Did he get caught up in a cult? Did they only let him go now to recruit more members? Those thoughts disappeared when he softly spoke a single foreign word, and all the pieces of paper snapped back into place as if they hadn't been ripped apart. He looked up, beaming, proud of the display. I wasn't sure if I should call a priest or a doctor to get my head looked at. It was a special piece of paper. It had to be, I said, shaking my head. Pick out something in the room and damage it. I'll fix it. I stared at him as if he had grown a second head. Was this some sort of scam? So far, he hadn't asked for money. A framed family photo sat next to the lamp on the dresser. I had long since scanned it as a backup, but the physical photo of our parents was important to me. I decided to trust my brother regardless of how crazy it sounded. He didn't look stressed when I took the photo out of the frame and ripped it in half. I placed it in the middle of the chalk circle. He erased a few symbols and rewrote new ones. He also used a different word. Like the paper before, the photo moved on its own and snapped back into place. My legs felt weak. I slowly sat down at the edge of the bed, trying to make sense of what I just saw. So, you're like a wizard or something now? I asked slowly. Or something, he confirmed. I stood up, suddenly deciding I needed one of the beers I had in the fridge downstairs. I grabbed two, but Charlie refused the one I offered to him. I had even more questions, but it was late, and he didn't want to go into too many details. Remember the first unsolved case I worked on? He asked once I sat down again with a cold drink in my hand. I nodded. From what I remember, the bodies of young girls had been found with photos that mysteriously showed up in different police stations. They didn't release that information to the public. Aside from myself, all our family members worked in law enforcement, so I had connections to hear details that didn't get released. I hired a person claiming he could talk to the dead. Turns out, he was a necromancer. We found the bodies, and, well, other stuff happened. We fell silent for a long time. I then punched his arm hard. Other stuff? What do you mean by other stuff? Necromancers are real. What the hell did you get up to? I said, fuming, because I was so far behind in all the details. Sorry, it's just personal. Something happened in that case that upset him, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. He disappeared, and I kept looking for him. By chance, I met the one who made him into what he was and decided to learn magic from him. Fee wanted to turn me into a necromancer too, but it turns out I'm really not suited for it, he said, casually as if any of this made sense to me. It felt like I was missing out on a lot of details, or I might even never fully understand, even if he tried to explain it to me. Okay, so magic was real as well as necromancers. I thought my head might explode if I heard anything else too weird that night. Where did you go? You talked about it like you were on a different planet or something. Are these necromancers aliens? At this point, aliens might not be that unreasonable. At first, he shook his head, then stopped to think. Not from space. You know about the whole multiverse theory, right? Charlie glanced at me, hopefully. I stood up, walked across the room, and closed the door behind me. I needed to pace around the house, gathering my thoughts for a full 10 minutes before I went back into the room with him. It looked like he might have fallen asleep sitting up, and I woke him by opening the door. Okay, I think I'm good, I stated. You're a bad liar. I wanted to scream. Until a few hours beforehand, the only thing I worried about was if my son would ever be able to get a partner and taxes. And now I needed to face the idea of magic and monsters being real. Placing my hands on my hips, I steadied myself. I went over what I had found out so far. Okay, so you met a necromancer because of a case you worked on. He disappeared, you tried to find him, and got caught up in all this magic stuff. since you weren't in the same universe as us, you lost track of time and all that. Am I missing anything? I asked, and he shook his head. Charlie. I let out a long sigh. This was hard to swallow, but better than the idea that he was kidnapped and sold into some kind of slavery. He thought the pause between us meant something else. Glancing up at him, I saw how guilty he looked, and so damn tired. I'm sorry. I should have come back sooner. I can understand if you hate me for leaving you two behind. He admitted softly, hands in his lap and unable to meet my gaze. Did you find him, at least? The person who got you mixed up in all this? I asked, arms crossed, trying not to let my anger show. Yes, but he has memory issues. It'll take a while longer to get through to him. I was in the area, so I thought I would drop by, unaware so much time has passed. I sighed again, listening to him. My brother had always been like this. It was why I didn't want him to become a cop. I'd hoped his height problems kept him from that career, but he was just tall enough for the job. He was stupid, got angry easily, but refused to leave someone alone if they needed help. This felt a bit different than any of the other times he put his neck out there for someone. What's the name of this necromancer he seemed to have fallen head over heels for? I asked, losing the will to be upset. Neff. And I'm not. I watched as different emotions came across his face in the dark. A realization hit him like a truck. My brother had always been stupid when it came to certain things. I would have hoped he wouldn't be dense enough to be unaware of his feelings for a person he had disappeared from his family to chase after. Slowly, I watched as his face started to grow a bright shade of red as he raised his hands, trying to hide his shame. I'm so stupid, he muttered to himself. I'd never seen my brother have any romantic feelings towards anyone, male or female. I'd always assumed he would die alone, dedicated to his work of helping others. I wasn't even sure if I should be happy. He finally found someone, even if that took him away from his family. Even if it didn't work out between them, he was able to learn magic. So, that was something. Yes, you are. But I'm glad you're back, I told him. He smiled and appeared so damn tired it hurt my chest. How about you rest up for the night? We'll figure out what to tell Carson in the morning. I'm sure he'll be happy to see you, but I don't know if we should let him in on all this magic stuff. He'll go crazy over it. Too crazy. My son had taken after his now estranged uncle in a few ways. Carson was more interested in books and TV shows than going out and dating. His nerdy obsessions would be cranked up so high that he would focus so much on what his uncle had been doing instead of anything productive. Sorry to barge in like this, and thank you for letting me crash. It'll be nice to see how much Carson's grown since I last saw him, Charlie said, as his head started to nod off from sheer exhaustion. Not much. We're all doomed height-wise, it seems. That's a shame. He really wanted to keep talking, but his body wouldn't let him. I helped him into the spare bed, seeing flashlights of bruises on his exposed skin where his sleeves shifted. What on earth had my brother been through? We would talk about it in the morning. I waited this long. A few more hours won't kill me. He fell asleep right away. I left the room, uncertain of how I was feeling. It felt a bit odd that I accepted everything he told me so quickly. Logically, I should have doubted the crazy story a little more. If it came from anyone else, I would have. Noise came from down the hall. Carson had woken up and just finished using the washroom. He shuffled back to his room, eyes barely open. As I walked by his door, I heard his tired voice call out. "Why are you awake?" he asked. I had an early morning shift. I should have been in bed. I made a mental note to call in sick. I debated lying and letting him sleep. But what if Charlie woke up and walked around the house, and Carson saw him? He looked different enough to assume a stranger had broken in. I walked inside his room and closed the door behind me. He sat up, concerned over what might be going on. I sat on the foot of his bed, unsure of where to start. "Your uncle is back," I said, keeping my voice low. Carson's bedroom was near the spare room. I didn't want us to wake up our long-awaited guest. Sensing the odd vibe in the room, Carson controlled his emotions.
Is he not good?
He asked, slowly, clearly worried. Yes and no. Mentally, I think he's fine, but it looks like he's been up to a few things. He's sleeping right now, so we'll talk in the morning, I explained.
Are you okay?
Carson asked. I smiled at the question. Oddly enough, I was. It felt like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I knew Carson was alright. He was that kind of person to be fine no matter what. I found myself wondering where he was or what he was doing nearly every single day. I just hoped Carson didn't suffer in the same way. Yeah, I'm fine, buddy. I reached out and messed up his sandy hair. When did he get so big? His mother wanted nothing to do with us. It was a struggle after my parents died to raise him, and I didn't regret a second of it. Glancing over at his shelf, I spotted a few more figures he had added to his collection. It was a mixture of very detailed characters, mechs, and busty girls wearing very little. Okay, so I did regret a tiny fraction of how I raised him. I stood up, ready to leave, hoping Carson would be able to sleep with his news. Just as I took a step, an odd rumbling came. Then the room shook. I went over to him, sitting on his bed, holding his arms. We didn't live in an area that got earthquakes. It lasted nearly an entire minute. When things settled down, we looked at each other, clearly shaken.
What was that? Something crashed?
Carson offered. It did sound like something large was being moved. We lived near a highway, so maybe a transport truck caused the noise. Did it hit the house somehow? I got back up and went to the door, opening it. The air was cold. An odd, red, glowing light spilled through the open doorway. I was seeing things. I closed the door again, then opened it once more, expecting things to be different. I was not looking out into the hallway. Instead, I stared off into a foreign, alien landscape. The only light source was a deep red, glowing ball in the sky, dyeing the twisted scene before us a black red. It looked like the entire place was covered in thorny trees, some so old they started to crack from age. There was enough space between the trees to walk through.
Oh, what the fuck?
Carson asked, getting out of his bed. Normally, I didn't like him swearing, but this situation called for it. My mind was racing. Did something follow Charlie here? Was he mixed up in something he forgot to mention? I decided I should just close the door and wait for him to wake up to deal with the problem. That was not in the cards. A vine crawled across the rough stone ground, taking hold of the wood, wrapping around it to keep it open. No matter how much I pulled, I couldn't break the door free from the tight grip. A flash was reflected from a smooth surface as a large blade came down on the vines. The sword buckled and chipped, not meant to actually be used. I stood in shock over my son holding a large, now mostly useless prop weapon. Of course, he would have swords. I just hadn't seen them before.
I got it at a con,
he admitted, and tossed the weapon aside. From under his bed, he pulled out a large box, sorting through more swords he had kept hidden. Finally, he pulled out a long katana that looked more authentic than the mostly prop swords in his collection. Is this what you've been spending your overtime pay on? I asked, eyebrow raised. He didn't appear embarrassed in the slightest. He attached the katana to his waist with the belt it came with. Then he took another try and sliced the vines off the door. This time, it cut without any issue. The issue was that more vines crept back as fast as he could cut them.
What do you want to do?
He asked, holding the sword at his side. I crossed my arms and frowned. You're dealing with all this pretty well, I pointed out.
You're not freaking out, which means this is a weird-ass dream, or magic and shit are real, and you know something about it. And Uncle Charlie came back tonight. The time between those two things must mean something.
He shrugged. Carson wanted magic to be real for his entire life. He wasn't the type to buy crystals and believe in New Age practices. If I were going to be stuck with anyone in this kind of situation, I would be glad it was him. Yeah, something like the second theory. I don't know much. I think we should wait until Charlie... My words were cut off by a raspy sound coming from inside the room. I put myself between Carson and the odd noise, fear spiking through my system. A long, thin, clawed hand slid out from under the darkness of the bed. Soon, a dark figure followed, sliding out, the body moving as if it didn't have any bones. It stood up so tall that it bent its neck when it reached the ceiling. The entire shape was made up of tattered black thorns with a bright set of white teeth hidden behind them.
Amuse me.
It spoke in a way I thought spiders might sound if they could form words.
Run.
I didn't need to be told twice. Grabbing Carson's arm, I took off into the odd landscape, catching sharp branches against my skin as we bolted. He did try to slash out at the monster while on the move. His sword did nothing to the nightmare chasing so close behind. The ground under us dipped, and my foot slipped. It was a miracle Carson kept the sword up and away from either of us as we slid down a small slope. Countless bones of different animals littered the bottom of where we landed. At least we lost the monster for now. Glancing up to double-check we weren't followed, I forced my racing heart to slow down. Carson was fine, just shaken. Hand over the sword, I said, trying to put on my best dad voice. He pulled it away from my outstretched hand, refusing.
I have more experience with it.
He pointed out. You can teach me, I countered. He shook his head, refusing. He was an adult now, taller than me, and stronger. I knew he would be better at fighting monsters. I was still his father. Even thinking of him facing that creature was too much to bear.
I can handle this. You need to trust me.
We didn't have time to stand around and talk. The sleek, black creature appeared at the top of the hill, the shape slithering its way toward us. We wisely started to run again, sharp bones under our feet, cutting into thin socks. I wished I were facing this creature with any kind of weapon and not in my PJs. Seeing a sturdy piece of bone on the ground, I picked it up just in time. The long clawed hand came down on my shoulder, the nails ripping into my shirt. I brought the broken bone back down into the cracks between the creature's thorns as it howled and backed away. Only for a moment. It darted around, almost too fast to follow. A teeth chattering, cackling echoed through the air.
I'll enjoy taking you apart, piece by piece.
It hissed as the claws came down again. I got in front of Carson to take the slash. Thankfully, the wounds were minor. This thing was going to take its time with us.
What the hell are you? What do you want from us?
Carson demanded. He pressed his back against mine, sword in front of him. He slashed at the creature when I got too close, making it keep its distance for now.
I am something you humans can never understand. Your pesky little family members interfered with my ritual to take over your pitiful world. I was planning on killing our dear, sweet monster hunter more. Then I saw he returned home. I would rather see his face of despair, knowing his actions caused your slow deaths before I slaughter him.
My stomach sank. We were facing a monster of nightmares we couldn't handle. If what he said was true, I doubted a sword my son bought off eBay could protect us for long. This thing was just playing with us. Carson, however, was too wrapped up in the moment to be as scared as he should have been. I looked over my shoulder to see him holding back an excited expression, hearing that his uncle went off to become a badass monster hunter. I needed to think of a way out of this.
Do anything you want to me. Leave Carson out of this. Charlie wasn't in his life. He barely knew the kid.
I half-lied. He had been gone for so long. When he was here, Charlie was the best uncle anyone could ask for. Carson started to protest when a batch of vines wrapped themselves around my legs. Soon my body was covered in them, lifting me off the ground, the thorns digging painfully into my flesh. I held back an expression of pain. Carson turned, hacking away at the vines in a weak effort to help. Was this what my brother faced alone for so many years? No matter how much I struggled, I was powerless against the vines slowly tightening around each limb. The creature rose up, a tangled mess that made up its face inches away from mine. It started to open, revealing what looked to be a bottomless pit of thorns and darkness. I was scared of death. Everyone is. But this fear was different. What I faced went beyond death. I don't think I would even die normally if this creature devoured me. Even face to face with such horrors, I was more afraid of my son going through the same fate. I mentally begged him to run, find his room, and be safe, far away from here. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, or even close my eyes. I could only make a feeble attempt to brace myself for what came next. The moment before those thorns enclosed themselves around my skull, a booming, crackling came from the sky. The monster turned its head only to be met with a fist, landing so hard into it that the creature broke apart. The thorns crumbled as I was dropped to the ground, sore, bleeding, but alive. The person who saved us stood above the creature, a look of pure, cold hatred directed downward. I didn't recognize him with that expression. He raised a finger again, his arms a deep black, so dark they may as well be a void. Heavy power crackled off the enclosed fist that came down, the ground breaking apart from the sheer force of the blow. The space around us shifted. Something in the air snapped as the image of the strange landscape literally broke into pieces, then disappeared. I found myself sitting in our backyard, Carson next to me, eyes bright from amazement. Somehow, the creature wasn't dead. It started to crawl away, shifting pieces of its body back together. Charlie, no, more, as this thing called him, walked over with a purpose. He placed a foot on the monster's back, pinning it to the spot. I found myself scared of him. I never thought my kind brother could look or sound like this. If you ever even think of my family again, I'll bring the full power of the first night onto your head, he said, his voice steady, hiding a held-back rage.
You can't. He would never.
The monster spoke, sounding almost pathetic. Whenever Charlie threatened it with something, it was enough to make the creature let out a yelp. He lifted his boots to let it scramble away into the shadows of the night. When he turned, his face shifted back into the brother I knew. I'm so sorry. I thought the barrier I set up was good enough. This is my fault. He started and hurried over to us, checking on how bad the wounds were. I started. This wasn't okay. I knew this wasn't his fault, and I shouldn't be angry at him. Will this ever happen again? I demanded. He paused, then shook his head. He would use every ounce of his new power to protect us. I knew that for certain, and from the sound of things, he had a lot of it to throw around. Val, can you help my brother? He's cut up, Charlie said, and I followed his eye line. I'm man enough to admit I screamed when I saw a massive wolf standing on two legs suddenly behind me. I went in front of Carson, protecting him. My stupid son peeked over my shoulder to get a better look. The beast had dark fur and would look like a covering over its face with a single eye painted on the white fabric. After I finished screaming, the wolf disappeared, as if it had never been there. He's shy, Charlie said. Okay, sure. Whatever. Shy werewolf. After what I'd seen tonight, I could handle that. After we all got settled down, Charlie reintroduced us to his wolf friend. As scary as Valak looked, he was kind and soft-spoken. His tribe focused on making medical spells and treatments. He offered me a lotion that mostly healed the cuts I'd gotten that night, and that was sorted. We let Carson mostly speak to the wolf with stars in his eyes. Again, I'm sorry. I was tired and I didn't protect the house properly, Charlie said as he leaned against the house. The sun was starting to rise. He looked better than when I saw him last. The short nap did him a world of good. Why didn't you kill that thing? You could have, I pointed out, watching the sky change colors. I made an example out of it. I don't think a lot of monsters will mess with you after it sees how badly I took that thing apart. He answered back almost coldly. He had changed since he was gone. It was hard to accept. My little, short-tempered, stupid brother turned into a person I no longer knew. I took a deep breath, collecting my thoughts. I still loved him. I always would. That guy you're chasing after better be really hot, I said, smiling at him. He raised a hand, shaking it with a very non-committal answer. Well, at least he would be within Charlie's league. Hey, kiddo, I need to go. Wrap up with Val in a few minutes. That got a whine from Charlie. He had so much more he wanted to talk about. Even with his face mostly covered, I could tell the wolf was exhausted from the conversation. His large body stiffened into one that was more wolf-like instead of a wolf standing on two legs. Charlie easily climbed onto his back as if it were natural. I promise I'll stay in touch, he said, petting the dark fur of his ride.
You gotta. I have so many questions. Come by more often, too. I'll help fight off any monsters that mess with us. And bring a Mothman next time.
Carson chattered on. Charlie raised an eyebrow, but nodded, agreeing to those conditions. I hated seeing him go again. This time, I had some answers. I didn't fully understand what kind of world he found himself in. All that I knew was that he could handle himself. He was my dear little brother, after all.
Thank you for listening and delving with me into the dark together.
Please remember to leave a thumbs up and subscribe if you feel so inclined. The more engagement this video gets, the more YouTube will push my content to others.
Thus, the following will grow.
All stories read in this channel will be available on Spotify, iTunes, and just about everywhere else. Links in the description.
Thank you for listening and feeding the cause. We'll be seeing you